This is Tony Roberts, and you're listening to WBAI in New York, the voice of truth since 1960.
Well, Malachy, that just takes us right in to our guests that are coming up today, because we're going to have on Dr. Patrick Treacy, who just got in from Baghdad. He's back in Dublin, and he has a book out called The Needle and the Damage Done. He's an amazing person. He's traveled the world. He's one of the most famous doctors in the world, the County Fermanagh man, and he will be coming on later. And then I'm going to do Malachy, because you said of the term Patty. Dr. Patrick Treacy, who I got to meet in Midtown, there was an exhibition of 50 Patties, and it was to talk about the 50 different Patricks and to expel the myth of calling everyone a Patty. And he was one of them, and it was his picture was up in Grand Central Station outside in Pershing Square and down at a gallery. But last Sunday, we had a great fundraiser with Marine veteran Katie Bishop, who has a GI coffee shop on 9th Street in the Gowanus area of Brooklyn. And I did part of my play off the meter there, but we had two people that opened for me. Was Annie Lancellato, and she talked about her father being in the Marines and fighting in Okinawa and the effect it had on him when he came back and what happened to the family. And also David Gilney, the Irish playwright from Dublin, did part of his play about being hit by lightning in South Boston. And that was David Gilney at Principal BK GI Coffee House on 9th Street in the Gowanus section of Brooklyn. They'll be bringing that play over a bolt out of the blue. And our guest now that, thank God, we have lined up, everything is working, is Dr. Patrick Treacy, and his book out is called The Needle and the Damage Done. I got to meet him at the Fitzpatrick Hotel a couple of weeks ago when he was in town for the art exhibition of the 50 Patties paintings. Well, it wasn't paintings, it was actually pictures that were in Pershing Square and Grand Central. But he just left Baghdad yesterday via Turkey into Dublin, and I'm looking at his Facebook book site, and Patrick, I want you to comment on this. Dr. Patrick Treacy worked as a staff health doctor at Air Bitar Hospital in Baghdad during the Saddam Hussein reign in 1990. He was arrested near Erbil by the Iraqi army while traveling through Kurdistan and jailed for 5 days while sourcing material for an article for the Fermanagh Herald about the gassing of the Kurds in Halabja. He revisited the hospital this week, where he was invited to speak at a dermatology conference in Baghdad. Now, Patrick, I just wanted to know, how come the impartial reporter didn't hire you to do this?
The oil is up in Kurdistan. So as a consequence almost of what happened during the years of the war, the transfer of power of the oil switched from the Arabs to the Kurds. And now I believe, parts of where I was up in Kurdistan now look like Dubai with brand new buildings and a whole new economy. And so that has happened also. And I've been invited back up.
Discrimination and against outsiders or how
they're not, Malachy, they're not that type of people. The discrimination that they have was against themselves. Saddam, sort of took the Treacy Sunnis and sort of, discriminated against the Shiites. No, but it was wonderful. On our gala night 2 nights ago in Baghdad, the Kurds and Arabs all came together and danced together and had, I put it on TikTok, put a lot of fireworks into the sky. And, these people are so hospitable to foreigners. They're the nicest people in the world. You couldn't believe it. And all the Arabic nations recognize that Iraq has always been like this. They sort of bring people into their homes, into their hearts. Even though they've nothing, they'll give you everything. I've seen the little shop guys on the street. If you walk by and you like something, and it's a different thing than buying. If you like it, they'll actually give it to you and not charge you. It's incredible,
It sounds like when under ancient Irish laws, there was a law about hospitality, that you couldn't refuse a stranger shelter or help or food or anything. And that was...
the brand law.
And then the Brits came and they knocked everything Irish out of the Irish. And so many, as you know, became the thing they hate the most, which is, I forget who said that. I said, that sounds like Iraq.
The most amazing thing also is when I was in Iraq originally, Karbala, the shrines were closed down because they were Shiite. But now people go from Basra and walk all the way. But the reason I mention it is all along the route, people are there with free food, with free accommodation, if they want to sort of sleep in people's houses. They massage their feet. It really is worth looking at on YouTube. Some of these people walk 200-300 miles and the whole lines. You talked about the coronation earlier. These people are there almost coronation style, giving everything to everybody for free. It is just the antithesis, as you said, of the British royal family that are now worth 160 billion, but still get the taxpayer to pay for the event when they can well afford it themselves.
4 minutes with Dr. Patrick Treacy. He has a book out called The Needle and the Damage Done. His life is unbelievable. It has to be a Netflix special because a movie wouldn't do it justice. There's not enough time. But you really became famous worldwide, and I'm looking at the front page of the Irish Sun. Irish doc fixes Jacko's face. And you were the doctor for Michael Jackson. How did that come about?
When he came to Ireland, he had some conditions that we can talk openly about now that Arnie Klein was treating, and I knew Arnie, he was before he died, and Michael had vitiligo. That's the first thing. He didn't want to change his face white. We actually changed it for him. He didn't do it himself. So we had to maintain, he was black and white. Particularly African patients, when they develop vitiligo, it's particularly striking because they're black with totally white areas and they look like a piebald pony. So we took Michael from the wrists down and from the ankles down and his face, and we continued the work that Arnie Klein had done using some chemicals to change Michael's face. Michael's problem was that he didn't tell people that he had vitiligo. People would have accepted it until he did mention it one day with Oprah to sort of just let people assume that he was magically turning white. The second thing is he had lupus, which the sun kicked off. And so that's why he wore the masks and the umbrella. He could have easily told people this also, but he didn't want his fans, I think, to think that he was in bad health. And the third thing is when we depigmented his skin, it left him susceptible, of course, to skin cancers. And I don't want to go down that route either because it's not the sort of thing I want to discuss regarding some of my patients. So Michael had built his own problems from the point of view that particularly the British press were horrible to him. When Michael had his head burned, remember in the Pepsi Cola ad, and the Brosnan Pediatric Center in Los Angeles got $1.5 million from him, he brought into them a thing that we use in medicine, which is baric oxygen chamber, particularly if you're doing skin grafts on patients that may not take, particularly burns patients, and they got him to get into it in the hospital and then said he had it at home trying to sort of, keep himself young in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, which is total nonsense. I mean, he donated this to the hospital. It was horrible the way they treated him, and certainly they would have loved to have seen Michael go under or to jail in the Santa Maria trial because they'd already paid people in there to give stories on him. But I mean, a very cruel press, and even they approached me and were willing to give me 5-figure, and I could have done it. It was around the time of the Irish recession. I mean, I could have done with the money. And they were willing, to give me 5-figure sums to talk about Michael behind his back, which I wouldn't do. I wouldn't talk about any patient, but I just thought it was terrible what they did to him,
Was the, so he was trying to change, what would you call it, progressive obsession with the, He had
an autoimmune disease where his sort of body attacked the melanocytes in his skin and destroyed them. So I mean, it's a condition that white people get it as well. I treat people all the time in dermatology with it, but it's particularly stunning with a black person because their face turns white in places and it's just black and white.
Right. So, and is it what we're saying? Is it a condition or a disease? What would you say it is?
It's both, really. I mean, I suppose it's a disease that causes the condition.
Yes.
And even Michael's abdomen was black and white. The first time I met him, and he was in the thing, he took down a book called De Vries, which is a famous book in dermatology. And he opened a chapter, with vitiligo with an African child. And he says to me, Patrick, you don't know the pain this child is going under. And I just tapped him on the head because I had to go out to do something. And I tapped him and I said, Michael, vitiligo, there is no pain associated with it. But I could see in his eyes that he meant something deeper. And he meant, of course, the mental pain associated with it, And when I came back then, he pulled up the leg of his trouser and says, I have this condition. I was a bit shocked to an extent, but then he actually took off his wig and showed me the top of his head, which was all scarred after the thing. And he says, let's start here when we're doing some of the treatments. So, he was very open and honest with me, but he knew that probably he could trust us also.
Are we Irish more susceptible? Are our skins more delicate than any other?
Just skin cancers?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. No doubt about it. Well, the problem is this. We're not really more susceptible, but we happen to follow the British in where they planted their colonies in a way that I suppose the Swedish don't or the Norwegians don't. So the British give us some wonderful things, including their language and including some of the finest colonies in the world, which are in Australia, Phoenix, Arizona, Canada, and all the rest. So as a consequence, if you transmigrate Irish or Scottish people to Queensland in Australia, that's where the highest rates of malignant melanoma in the world are. I worked for 2 or 3 years in skin cancer centres there. And yes, there's no doubt about it that the native people who would live in Phoenix, Arizona, would not necessarily be Irish or Scots or Celts, and they would have more melanin in the skin and wouldn't be as susceptible. Black people don't tend to get melanomas. We do, but I mean, they get it under their nails. Bob Marley, you remember, died of a melanoma subungual under his nail, but his father was white also. So as a consequence, it's unusual. It's more usual for obviously Irish and Scottish that have no protection against the sun. If you transmigrate them into an area with intense sun, they obviously have no protection. They're going to burn, and sunscreen isn't going to do it for you. Really, you need to just stay out of the sun or wear hats.
What can we do? What's the best thing to do? I'm light-skinned, and I don't know. I have some. I don't know whether I'm susceptible, but maybe I am. I don't know. I haven't had any condition that requires medical treatment.
Well, anyway. Malachy, God in his goodness gave us triggers. If we're short of water, we get thirsty. If we are too long in the sun, we burn. And the problem is that when we put on some of that sunscreen, we're blocking the receptors that tell us we're in trouble and in pain. And people stay out in it too long then as a consequence. So skin cancer centres are going up through the roof. I wrote my first paper in the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota on malignant melanomas back in the 80s as a student, and predicted that rates would continue to rise, which they have. They haven't dropped yet. And in terms of sunscreen, certainly we advocated for people who have had previous skin cancers that should wear up to about 50. I'm not sure if I advocate that everybody in Dublin that gets no sun at all should be wearing sunscreen all day long, unless, of course, they're taking vitamin D supplements, Malachy, because if you're blocking out the sun and you are not taking vitamin D supplements, you're going to leave yourself more at risk of getting a heart attack and other cancers. That's well
Malachy, we're going to have to jump in here. Dr. Patrick Treacy, he has a book out, The Needle in the Dark. What we're going to have to do is have you back again and take phone calls and maybe have the doctor on the air and talk to our audience about what you specialize in and what you've done in your life. So Patrick, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, John. And Malachy, great hearing you in such good form. Sorry I missed you in New York, but it was a quick in-out as well.
Yes,
yeah. So what we're going to do now is play a clip from Annie Lancelotti, the Lion of the Bronx, was well-known down in the Lower East Side, a street artist, and performs plays all over Ireland, actually, and here in New York. She did this at a fundraiser for Veterans for Peace at the Principal's BK GI Coffee Shop on 9th Street. And when we come out of this, we're going to have Mick Malampy on, and he's going to be talking about the first Irish Origin Theater and some of the things they have coming up this week.